All right. Good evening and welcome to the Neary Building Committee meeting for July 22nd, 2024. It is 7:32 p.m. And I'll note we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, there's 6 of our 7 voting members present from Neary Building Committee, and I do expect that Chris will join us momentarily. There is also jointly posted meetings of Board of Health, which does not have a quorum right now, and school committee. So Chelsea, I'll let you call school committee to order because you have 3 of your 4.
Great, thank you. I'm calling the Southborough School Committee meeting to order at 7:33. 3 out of 4 members are present.
All right. With everyone's permission, I would like to skip item 2, the meeting minutes, and get right to our guest from PAR and go through that agenda topic, and then we can go back to the meeting minutes and go through the rest of our agenda if that works for everyone. And I'll just, Chelsea, for your benefit, you now have 4 of your 4 school committee members. So for this, I'm going to bring over the DPW superintendent as well as Tim from PAR. And Taylor, I see you're there. If you want to come over for anything on the Board of Health, just raise your hand and I will certainly bring you in as well. All right. Good evening, Tim.
Good evening.
Bill. How are you?
Good.
Hi. So this agenda topic is as a result of obviously our desire to do something related to construction on the existing Neary school site in and around the current footprint. A lot of questions have come up around what is known as the Parkerville landfill. Some may call it other terms, but obviously we wanted to bring you in tonight to, one, understand what is currently done by the town, what is required to be done, and then any recommendations that you all have for the future, both required, whether it be DEP or other regulatory authorities, as well as recommendations just because of the nature of the site. Those were the 2 questions that led to inviting you here, but I'm sure there may be other members that have questions about the landfill as we go here. And we obviously have our consultant team here as well that may have questions. So I think the easiest would be Tim or Bill just to articulate what the town does now, and then, you know, maybe what you would recommend as you go forward here.
Well, I'll defer to Tim, if you don't mind, Tim.
Sure.
Tim's been doing this for years. I've only been here the past year, so he certainly has a lot more experience with the Parkerville Road landfill than I do. I do have some insight because a lot of my background experience is with solid waste management and landfills specifically. But if I have anything to add to what Tim has to say, I'll jump in.
Sure. So, you know, as Bill alluded to, we've been doing the monitoring out there at the landfill now for a few years. And so what the town does on an annual basis out at the landfill is the town does monitoring, right? We are in what's called a post-closure monitoring period. So the landfill was closed back in the 1990s. And when you close an old landfill like that, you enter into what used to be a 30-year period for landfill monitoring. A lot of states have gotten away from 30 years, and you do it in perpetuity until you can demonstrate that there's no significant risk. But we are in that 30-year period right now. We're in a monitoring period. So what we do annually is we do groundwater monitoring at 6 groundwater monitoring wells around the landfill. We do surface water sampling at 2 surface water locations around the landfill. And we do gas monitoring at around 20 locations. Not all of those locations are, some of the probes that we monitor need to be replaced, but around 20 locations we do landfill gas monitoring. So we do the gas monitoring on a quarterly basis, and we do the surface water and the groundwater monitoring on an annual basis. And we also do an annual inspection of the landfill. And that's essentially to inspect the cap, the covered surface, to make sure that it's in good condition, that, you know, we're not seeing evidence of deterioration of the cap, because this is a capped landfill. So we do that on an annual basis as well. And then that on an annual basis, we provide all of that data to the Mass DEP. So that's where we are right now with the landfill. Any questions about what we do?
Tim, if you don't mind, as you may know, there is a post-closure use of the landfill. It's used as a field currently. So from a risk perspective, that's also plays into the equation. But I'll let you continue after that, Tim.
Yeah, correct. So on top of the landfill right now is a post-closure use. There's some rec fields on top of the landfill, and when we do the inspection on an annual basis, that's one of the things we pay attention to, is the condition of the cap where the fields are. Right, we don't want you know, the kids playing on the field to be exposed to the buried waste underneath the cap. We also don't want the activity on the cap to cause the cap to degrade. Right, so we look at those two things, and if we start to see, you know, a little bit of additional wear and tear on the cap from where kids are playing, or from where maybe precipitation is ponding on the top of the landfill, we'll make recommendations to the town at that point to make some repairs to the cap. You know, these are usually very minor, you know, fill in some areas where the grass is no longer growing, you know, kind of put some topsoil down, reseed it. If we see animal burrows along the sides of the landfill, which we see pretty commonly, you know, we'll make recommendations to fill in those burrows, stuff like that. All pretty minor stuff. But that is something we pay attention to, is the playing surface on that on the top of that landfill.
Thank you. Roger?
Hi, I think this is for Tim. So I don't know much about this at all, but I've heard you say you monitor a number of different items. You know, 6 locations here, 20 here, or what? So it's a two-part question, really. Does every single item have to be good, or are there kind of grades of succeeding? And depending on how you answer that question, have we always kind of passed with flying colors ever since you started the process, or were there times that something had to be done?
So there are, we'll say, shades of gray in terms of what we monitor for, and how, you know, the immediacy of some of the recommendations that we make. So if we see something out there that we think is going to cause the cap to deteriorate very quickly, like if we see a hole or something, you know, like say a lawnmower inadvertently cut a really significant, you know, divot out of the top of the landfill, we'll say, hey, look, we should get out there and repair that right away before that causes the cap to be damaged. The cap is covered with topsoil, right? The cap itself is actually a fairly thin liner, and we don't want that to get damaged. So if we see something like that, there's an urgency to get out there and fix it. Fortunately, in the time that I've been here, we've not seen anything like that. In terms of the other monitoring that we do, we monitor for landfill gas, right? Landfill gas is typically thought of as methane, although it has other constituents like hydrogen sulfide in it, carbon monoxide in it. There are shades of gray there as well, right? If we detect landfill gas at any of the monitoring points, that in and of itself is not cause for concern. But if that concentration of gas rises to a certain level, we do make recommendations, or we would have to make recommendations at that point to either do more monitoring off-site, or to go out there and try to mitigate that gas generation. Again, we've been fortunate. All the monitoring that we have done over the last few years, we have not seen any significant concentrations of landfill gas at any of our monitoring points. And then there's the groundwater and the surface water monitoring. Now, we look for contaminants in the groundwater and the surface water, and we do find some on a pretty regular basis, albeit at relatively low concentrations, not, not non-detect, and some of them do exceed drinking water standards. But because there's nobody that we know of that is drinking this water, right? Almost everybody is on town water. There's not a requirement to go out there and say remediate it or to expand our monitoring. The requirement is when we find this stuff is just to continue to monitor it to make sure it doesn't get worse. The concentrations that we found out there in groundwater, like I said, a handful of metals, 1 or 2 VOCs we found in groundwater at a few locations, not even at all the locations, just a couple of the locations. And the concentrations are relatively low, nothing to be alarmed about. So if they really started to get up there in terms of concentration, we may have to make additional recommendations, like I said, for either more monitoring or potentially remediation, but that's not been the case.
All right, well, thank you so much.
Sure.
If I could just add to what Tim said, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Bill.
We do submit those reports to the state, the DEP, as well as the local Board of Health. They do review them. I've spoken to the people that do come out and check the inspections that we do, and they also review the reports that are submitted. If there's anything that's of concern that rises, they do reach out to the town, and we have to address the issue.
And Bill, just for clarity, who is responsible for making sure that this happens every year? It's budgeted every year. Like, whose budget is it in? Who's ultimately accountable to make sure that people show up and do the right work?
Sure. The DPW, my department, carries in our annual operating budget money to have a consultant, in this case PAR, do the post-closure monitoring and inspections of both the landfill and the transfer station. It's one contract, and they're very diligent. They do it like clockwork. They put it in the schedule and it gets done. I get a report, I review it, forward it to the DEP and the local Board of Health, and pretty much that's it. Very mechanical.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
Mark?
Yes, thank you for coming in. Do we know what direction the groundwater is flowing in that area?
We do, although I apologize, I should have brought that with me. I have that in my report, and I don't have it with me right here.
Well, and the assumption I make, since you have a well
Mhm.
north along Parkerville, that it probably goes north and east. Is that a fair assumption?
So it goes, I believe it goes north and slightly west.
Okay.
We have the landfill essentially ringed with wells, because as part of the monitoring, we want to do up gradient wells and down gradient wells. So we
Okay.
can contrast what's coming onto the site versus what's leaving the site.
Here's what I'm hoping to hear, and it may be a two-step process. We're building a school that's downhill from the landfill. And we're projecting the school to be operational in excess of 50 years. Are there some, well, let me put it this way. We're putting in an under drainage system under the foundation to mitigate any groundwater, because we realize the groundwater is high in that area. Is there anything we should do to help testing to make sure that we're not getting results any closer to the school than we now have them?
So the school that you're building, it's all new construction. Is it going within the footprint of the existing school?
We have not decided whether it's new or an ad reno, and it's in and around the existing footprint, but likely larger than the existing footprint.
And it'll likely come a little bit east, depending on which way we go. So it does get a little bit closer.
Okay. So I think due diligence is important, and it's, it sounds like the purpose of this call is to start that due diligence process. You know, there's nothing at the site right now that we know of that's cause for any significant alarm at the site. But because you are building a school, whether it be new or a renovation or an addition, it would be prudent to put measures in place for what could be a changed condition in the future. And specifically, I'm thinking about two things. I'm thinking about the groundwater. Like you mentioned, you're going to have some dewatering around the site. We know that the groundwater, at least immediately around the landfill, has been impacted. It's got some concentrations of contaminants in it, particularly heavy metals, arsenic and cadmium are present in the groundwater. There's a very small amount of one particular VOC in groundwater called 1,4-dioxane. It's a relatively low concentration, but it is present. And so if you are planning to dewater groundwater in that area, right, we would want to understand what's in the groundwater more immediate to the school, right? Not necessarily because the kids are going to be coming in contact with that groundwater, but because that groundwater now is going to get collected and it's going to get discharged somewhere, right? It has to go somewhere. If you're getting it away from the school, you got to put it somewhere, right? So it would be important to understand what's in that groundwater closer to the school, where you're actually going to be dewatering. The other thing I'm thinking about, go ahead.
No, would that mean that we might have to put in 2 or 3 additional wells a lot closer to the school?
Potentially, yep. Yep. And then the other thing that I'm thinking about is landfill gas and vapors, right? We don't believe that that's an issue right now, but landfill gas can be tricky. Landfill gas migration, beneath a landfill can change over time as waste decomposes, as the landfill settles. It can change the makeup of the material underneath. So that pattern of landfill gas migration can change over time. And so it's prudent. We always recommend on anytime we're building a new school, we always recommend what's called a sub-slab depressurization system. Usually a passive one to start. If we don't believe that there's an issue right now, we'll start with what's called a passive system. Now, a passive system is really just pipe and stone underneath the foundation, much like a French drain system that you would put to dewater groundwater. Think of it as like a radon system, right? It'd be very similar to a passive radon system. It's very inexpensive to do when you're building new construction, right? It's very easy to add to the foundation when you're doing new construction. It's a little trickier and a little bit more complicated if you're trying to retrofit a building with this, a building that's already built, because it does go under the floor. But like I said, it's a very simple system. And we usually size it and design it so that if we ever found an issue in the future, we could convert it to what's called an active system, meaning we could put a vacuum on it and we could actually actively ventilate the subslab under the school. And that would prevent 2 types of gases from getting into the school. That would prevent landfill gas like methane, which could be potentially an explosion hazard. That would prevent that from getting in. And it would also prevent other volatiles from getting into the building as well. Things that might not be necessarily explosive, but things you don't want to be breathing in, right? So this would prevent those from getting into the building as well. So like I said, we always recommend a sub-slab depressurization system on these school sites.
Excellent. The other concern would be if any of those present gas locations have a high concentration of something, being down in the bowl, is there any concern that suddenly we're going to have gas flowing downhill to settle in down near the school?
Well, most of the gases that we're talking about, the primary gas, I should say, that we're talking about, methane is lighter than air. So it wants to go up. So being in a bowl in that sense actually helps you guys because it wants to go up, not down.
Okay.
Some of the heavier gases could settle down there, but we really don't have much of a concern about those. Those are not really present.
Okay. I guess my last quick question, and this is kind of goes beyond this, but I'll just state it anyway. We may need to get together separately and set a reporting mechanism. And it may need to go to town meeting at some point, because the landfill is currently owned by the school department, managed by DPW, reporting to the Board of Health, and the school department has been kind of left out of the mix. I'm not so sure they should be owning it. But we need to have some rules and regulations set up so that the school department knows exactly, do we keep kids out of certain areas? Do we want to fence off certain areas so that we don't have them getting close to any exposed groundwater? So I think there needs to be a second level of discussion so that we can clear up the title and have a reporting mechanism so that we know it's being done every year, and we know that the results are put in terms that, hey, school department, this is an issue and we need to do the following. That's the discussions I want to make sure that we incorporate. I'm not going to be here 50 years from now. But I want to make sure we've had this discussion. We've done everything possible we can to keep the site clear. But moving forward, we don't have any missed testing years, or we don't have any missed communication that causes some harm. So I think it's prudent on our part as a town to kind of take it one level, and that's not with our committee. But that's sitting with the selectmen, the DPW, the school department, and making sure we have a mechanism to do it right. Recreation's involved in it too, because they maintain the field. We've got a dog park. We got to make sure we have a whole set of rules and regulations, that we're not walking down a path that we shouldn't be. And that I guess that's my final comment.
Good comment. We obviously have chair of school committee, chair of select board, superintendent of schools here, DPW superintendent. So that might be a good action item for the fall. It just depending on where this project goes, to see whether there is any action required for spring town meeting. Denise?
To this point, I guess my question is, there's never been a need or a necessity to test closer to Neary. Is that correct?
So far, the data, since we've been doing it, the data has been pretty good. I would say there's been no need to test closer.
Okay, so confidently you can say up to this point in time, we have not had any problems around the Neary building site as it is today.
What I can say is that at the locations around the landfill that we have monitored, particularly for like landfill gas, have come back almost entirely non-detect. I mean, we've not picked up any landfill gas.
Thank you.
Are there questions for Tim on this topic? All right. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Bill.
Welcome. All
You're
right.
welcome.
Thank you very much.
Have a good night.
You
You
too.
too.
Chelsea, is school committee staying with us, or are you adjourning?
I think we're adjourning because I had the agenda posted for this particular topic. So I'll go ahead and move that the school committee adjourn at 7:57.
Second,
Roger,
yes, aye.
Laura,
Didn't hear you, Laura. Maybe you just put your thumb up or
oh,
something.
sorry, Laura,
Oh, there we go. Aye, sorry about that mute issue.
Alan,
Aye.
and Chelsea is aye. Thank you for inviting us and have a great night.
Sure. All right. Let's go back to the two sets of meeting minutes before I forget those at the end. So we have two sets of meeting minutes, July 8th, I believe, and July 15th, if I got my dates correct. Any comment on July 8th? Any comments on July 15th? I will make a motion to approve both sets of minutes as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, motion's been seconded. Any further discussion? Roll call vote. Denise,
Abstaining, I was not there that night on the 8th.
Mark,
Aye.
Roger,
Aye.
Kathy,
Aye.
Andrew,
Aye.
Chris,
Aye.
and I am I as well. So that is a 6-0-1 vote. Okay. So we are moving into our Skanska and Arrow Street updates. As a reminder, our next agenda item is going to be to vote on what we are sending to cost estimation. To be very clear, we are not making any decisions tonight on which scenario we're bringing forward as our preferred schematic. So the decision points that we have to get through are going to be a 2 versus 3-story configuration, and then I'll call it a shape configuration for some of the other scenarios. And we'll have Katie, Larry, the team walk through each of the ones, but those are the 2 decision points that we have to give direction to Arrow Street tonight on in terms of how they want to cost it. I do not believe there are any options left for discussion for them to estimate the ad reno, but they can keep me honest when they have the floor. I will, though, however, start with my understanding is that there was some additional discussions between the school administration and Arrow Street as a follow-up to Thursday night's meeting, and there has been additional square footage removed from the base calculation that they will send out for estimation. So I wanted to at least give Greg and the Arrow Street team a chance to just update everyone on where they are at, so that we can at least have a baseline expectation of where we're at. I realize it may not be where everyone wants to be or could be where people want to be. I don't know, but I just want to ring fence that, but also realize we don't have to fully agree on square footage tonight. We can talk a little bit about that, but we need to agree on a couple of scenarios coming up here. So I guess Katie, Greg, anyone else, why don't you at least run through where you think you're at square footage wise and then go from there.
So I have a slide that summarizes this. How about I bring it up and then Greg, would you like to narrate according to the reductions that we discussed?
Sure, that works. All right, so Stephanie and I spent some time relooking at the space summary for the 305 and 610 enrollment. The areas where we identified spaces to look at are the classroom size, the square footage, and we reduced the classroom size from 950 square feet to 900 square feet. So it's a 350 square foot reduction from the last model we saw in the 305 model, and the 610 model at 1,700 square feet. We also had conversations with Arrow Street around the Learning Commons and reduced the square footage from 1,000 square feet to 900 square feet. And again, in the 305, it's a 200 square foot reduction, and the 400 square foot reduction in the 610. And then lastly, we just looked at office space and small group rooms, as well as extended day office and extended day storage as reductions in square footage without impacting the overall educational plan that was set forth in the PDP. So the gross reduction for square footage for 305 was a little over 2,600 gross square feet, and for the 610, it was a little over 4,000 gross square feet. And I'd be happy to answer any questions around the impact to the ed program.
I'm just gonna add really quickly preemptively, because I'm sure there will be questions about why the final item has 0 square feet. That is a non-programmed space. I know we've been struggling with how to describe those spaces that are included in the grossing factor. So that's what that is. It is giving that space back to the grossing factor.
Greg, can you clarify whether you have any concerns or reservations about these?
Sure. So I honestly do not have reservations around these reductions, with the exception of I think the larger the classroom space, the better. And when you're talking about instructional design and learning design, I think 950 square feet is ideal, but 900 square feet is still a good sized classroom. That is the only area that I have some reservations about, but nothing on this table is anything that I cannot support. And Stephanie, I believe, I'm not sure if you want to make any comments, Stephanie, as well.
No, I agree with that. I think that like for some of the spaces like the student support office and the small group were places where we kind of realized some redundancies and other ways to accommodate those needs. And so I would say the classroom is, you maximize to the extent you can, and then I think 900 is still going to work well.
Kathy?
So Greg and Stephanie, thank you for doing this. This is great, definitely headed in the right direction as far as trying to get the estimated cost down. Katie, have you updated? I haven't had a chance to look at what Jason put on the email today as far as materials for tonight. Katie, have you, okay, here's, so you've updated this and the individual spreadsheets?
I have, yes.
Okay. Jason, do we have these?
You don't, because I just got them like an hour before the meeting, so I figured let them walk through, see if there's any changes, and we'll circulate them after the meeting.
Okay, so did you just say you'll get them to us after the meeting?
Yes, unless there's changes that come out of the meeting, in which case I'm not committing to a timeline.
Okay.
Are you done, Kathy?
Mhm.
Okay, Roger?
So I have I guess I'm curious about the classroom size reduction, which I guess this came, this 850 square foot reduction, which I guess my math says that's reducing the size of 17 classrooms. From what I've heard the superintendent say is really the optimum, but that 900 square feet would be livable and good. But I'm trying to understand, did this get here because you went along with it, Greg? In other words, you're talking about, I'm not sure what infinitesimal amount of square feet compared to the total thing that this saved. It was less than 1,000. And if we're talking about all the classrooms, I'm looking at the 305 enrollment. I'm kind of wondering why this is here. Is it here for discussion? Is it here because I'm not sure.
So Roger, I can provide a rationale. So first, we revisited the current average square footage of classrooms at Finn, Woodward, and Neary to make sure that we have the average class size, which is around 900 square feet on average. We also took into consideration the schools that we toured and the class sizes of the schools that we visited, which range from, I believe, and Katie and Larry, correct me if I'm wrong, 850 square feet to approximately 900 square feet. I'm not sure if there were classrooms any larger, but again, we took into account the class sizes of the schools we toured. And believe that 900 square feet is a healthy size for a classroom, a healthy space for students, and a 50 square foot reduction does not impact the overall educational experience in a classroom as a result. Part of the work and the rationale was really looking at the total square footage per student and really trying to get that to a place where like districts of like sizes where building schools are in a similar range. So that's a rationale that we use, Roger.
And can I'll just add that I think it's important also to remember that we have preserved those small group rooms that fall between the classrooms, and we're preserving the learning commons. And those are both places that we imagine the learning sort of spills out and is connected to what's happening in the classroom. So in thinking about kind of the educational programming, while the, gen ed classroom size matters, it doesn't stand alone also. So that was another consideration.
So if I could just follow, so maybe I should have asked my question a different way. I have no idea what the right size of a classroom should be. But the reason I asked my question, Greg, is because you identified the classroom size as at least somewhat concerning. In other words, you kind of led in with this is the one area that you're not sure about. Otherwise, I mean, I wouldn't have asked the question at all. So something bothers you about this, okay? Or it bothered you enough so that you actually brought it up, as kind of the lead about the space reduction.
Yeah, so throughout the process, one of the key, one of the key criteria we looked at is the classroom size. So that was a important aspect of the design. So 950, when we look at MSBA's required, space for a classroom, 950 is on the upper end of square footage allowed. But again, when we're looking at the scope of this building, the size of this building, looking at the educational plan, and when we can say we don't think reducing each classroom by 50 square feet is going to impact the educational plan, I think it's an important consideration because there is a cost factor that also comes into play when talking about this building. Again, I do not have, if money were no object, I would go for a larger class size, classroom spaces. But I am comfortable with 900 square feet. And to Stephanie's point, there are also a lot of other flexible spaces that are designed into the design of the building at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Andrew?
Just Katie, one question on the extended day storage. There should be some reduction from that, right? Because it was 300 NFA, which would have been 450 gross, right? So even bringing it down to 150 gross, there should be still a 300 reduction in gross, right?
So you take the net of all of the MSBA programmed spaces, and then from that you use the 1.5. We're using 1.5 total right now, grossing factor, just to give it the maximum, the worst case scenario. And within that number that is calculated as the 1.5, this extended day storage has to be part of that. So no matter where it is always part of that number that is calculated as the 1.5. You're just taking it so that you can't use it for corridors, for stairs, some of the other things that are contained within that grossing factor. So you're sort of giving it back to the rest of the building. But the gross is calculated off of the net, which is before you even get to this number.
But if you're reducing it, so right now it's 300, 450 total, right? And if you're basically making it into 150 in the grossing, then there should still be a 300 reduction in grossing.
You're just giving that 300, you're giving the difference back to the overall grossing.
But then
So
our grossing ratio would be over 1.5
which you
because
can't,
there'd be no net to do off of it.
you can't exceed 1.5. So we're taking the net number and then you multiply the 1.5. And there are two spaces that are actually storage spaces that the MSBA, this was from the most recent comments, said that they need to be taken from the grossing number. So the grossing number doesn't change either way.
Yeah.
It's going to stay the same. So all you're doing is giving that square footage back to your slightly wider corridors or some other use like that.
Okay.
I don't know, Andrew, I still agree with you. And we get that you can't go over 1.5.
I mean, Kathy, I think the calculation's going to be fine when we do the spreadsheet. It's just technically, I think the reduction is larger than what we're showing. But in the end, it'll still be reflected accurately in the spreadsheet.
What it might end up doing is reducing your grossing factor by that amount. But at the moment, we're keeping our grossing factor at 1.5.
At the moment.
Right. And until we lay out the building, and then once we see the layout, we can start to see where the grossing factor really ends up. But as Katie was saying, a couple things happened there. One is the MSBA did direct us to move the extended day storage from a net area to part of the grossing. So it's part of that 0.5. And once you pull it out, it goes away, but we don't benefit from that net.
You still have a question, Andrew, or is
No, I think we're okay.
Yeah, but they're also reducing it by 150 square feet too. So let's not dwell on this, but it doesn't look right to me. Roger, you missed last week's meeting. So what happened is Andrew and I had gone through all the MSBA guidelines for our square footage, and we put together a spreadsheet with a alternate on it to try to reduce the square footage. And Greg and Stephanie and their team went back and took a look at it, and this is what they have decided they could do based on that suggestion. But I still think, I don't think the extended day is coming out right, but we can fix that.
Won't a lot of this fall out as we do more cost estimation and actually design the building?
Yes.
That's where I'm stuck.
I think it's going to fall on the spreadsheet, Jason, so that's why there's no reason to keep dwelling on this.
Okay. All right. So with that being said, are there any other square footage related questions at this moment? Okay. So Katie, I don't know if you're going to still drive or Arrow Street Andrews driving on this piece, but whoever's going to drive, I think we need to go to the options at this point. Remind everyone, because we have had some members miss meetings, just let's start with the 2 versus 3 story right now. Make a decision on which direction we're sending you on there. So I think if we can just walk through that one more time, then we'll go to the other piece in terms of the shape of the building.
Sure. So let me pull that up.
While Andrew is pulling that up, I'll give just the quick preview. Jason, before you were saying that we don't have an ad reno option, the B4 option is still at play for the estimator, but there are no decisions that we need to make. We have a single scenario, so we don't really need to talk about it.
Yeah, okay. So that's what I thought I said, that we're still estimating it. We're still estimating it, but there's no decisions that we need to make tonight.
Correct.
Okay. All right.
So one thing I want to point out is that I'll go through basically what we had shown last week. And then I also brought this evening a version where we take the auditorium out of the equation, because that was something that was discussed last week, where perhaps it was not going to be even considered as an alternate. And so we have some layouts that look at what that would do. And so I just wanted to let you know that that's coming as well. But I'll start with what we showed last week, and then I'll show you for this this first option, the variation where we don't have the auditorium. So what you see on the screen here is the C1 scheme, and this is the 3-story option. So we're calling this one C1A. And basically it's characterized by sort of 2 bars in an L-shaped configuration, with 1 bar being the shared public spaces, which includes the gym and cafeteria, and in this version, the auditorium. The other bar is the academic bar, which has a first level of arts and music and media, and then the classrooms and grade levels on the 2nd and 3rd floors. And I think I'm going to stick with these 3D views to start, and we can always dive into the plans. But if anyone wants to look at a plan, we'll go back there. But I'm going to flip now to compare and contrast this one with the 2-story version. So now I'm going to option C1B, and here where it's the same idea of these sort of 2 bars in an L-shaped configuration. But it looks at doing the academic classrooms on just 2 levels. And the way that that's accomplished is by locating the arts and music spaces on the 2nd floor, and by sort of elongating the academic wing on this side. So I'm gonna now compare this 2-story, because we looked at this 2-story without the auditorium, and the reason we did that was because there was feedback last week about perhaps the auditorium should be removed, and also feedback from the district about it would be better if the music and art spaces were on the 1st floor and have a the sort of closer adjacency to some of those other spaces on the 1st floor. So to look at that option, now I just want to make sure, did this show up? This should say on your screen option C1B, no auditorium. Is everybody seeing that? Yeah, okay. So what this does is reconfigures that sort of shared and public space bar a little bit. And what it does is locates the gymnasium on the sort of public corner here, and places the media center at the sort of hub of the 2 wings, and locates the cafeteria adjacent to the media, and places the music and arts also sort of adjacent to the media. And that allows us to kind of still have our 2 grade levels on this academic wing on 2 floors, and is a somewhat more kind of compact layout. It's the same size building. It's just putting things on the 1st floor that it seems like are going to work better there. And I am going to go to the floor plan on this one because it's new from last week, and I'll zoom in a little bit. So you can see here on the 1st floor, what this does is it locates the administration and sort of entry on an axis that sort of lets you access the media space and the cafeteria. And then there's sort of a second hallway that crosses that connects the gym to the classrooms. And then there's sort of a secondary hallway that gets you back here to the arts and music and some of the special education spaces. The reason that we located some of these things here was that one of the benefits of the L-shaped scheme is that it does sort of set up this courtyard or potential playground area. And we thought it would be nice if the cafeteria and media space and potentially the learning commons all sort of had an overlook to this space as a sort of view out, and sort of you can imagine that being a nice thing to see as you're kind of going about your day moving around the building. That's also present in the other 2 variants of this, but we thought about it a little bit more carefully when we were reconfiguring this since the last meeting. So those are the 2 versus 3-story. And sorry, I didn't go to the 2nd floor. Let me just do that real quick. Here you see it's on the second floor, the only piece of program would be the fifth grade classrooms and associated spaces. So I can pause there, so we can keep talking about the 2 versus 3.
Go ahead, Kathy.
Andrew, did you show a C1A without the auditorium?
I did not. And the reason I did not was it seemed like from the feedback we had from the last week and from the district that the 2-story option was preferred. Of course, it could be there is a scheme like that. We just didn't try one.
Until we vote, I don't think you should assume that, given that one saved $630,000.
Fair enough.
Andrew?
Did you say that the C1B no auditorium didn't change the footprint square footage?
It's very close. It's about the same. The overall building square footage is reduced.
Okay.
Sorry. I was talking about the.
Okay, we just added that much extra hall space. I was
yeah. If I no.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks for clarifying.
Okay, so it went down roughly whatever the auditorium square footage.
Yes.
Okay.
But the amount on the ground is similar.
Yeah. Okay.
Roger?
I think I at least inquired about this or maybe partly about this before. That and the question is about the difference in cost between the same number of square feet on 3 stories versus, and I'm aware of the educational, benefit discussion that has been held.
$600,000.
So it saves 600,000 to go for the 3rd story.
Yes.
That's our understanding from the cost estimator.
Okay, thank you for reminding me of that.
Mark?
Yeah, can you just show the 3-story, and if there was no auditorium, just kind of visually walk us through what the changes might entail?
Sure. So essentially, let me just open up the pen here. So this is the auditorium here. And if that were to be removed from the equation, the stage would remain. And so we would locate the stage adjacent to the cafeteria. And so the net result is that, perhaps the overall building footprint would be, let me try to draw something here, would be something less than what you see here, but, you might have, bear with me 1 second here. Something like that would allow you to fit the cafeteria, kitchen, stage, and the special education pieces that were adjacent to the auditorium. So I'm going to just move this to side now. So that's where the 3-story one is with the auditorium. And if I take this back and drop it on top, it's something like this. So that would mean that you're removing the square footage of the auditorium itself and reducing somewhat the sort of footprint and amount of foundation that's touching the ground.
Okay.
But I would imagine that the other sort of wing of that L configuration would largely remain similar to how we have it.
Is that everything you had to present on 2 versus 3 stories?
Yes, it is.
Okay, let me ask this question. if I sense there's a divide, just based on some of the comments. If we were to estimate, again, estimate a two-story building, which we believe is going to be more expensive than a three-story building. We then select that option as part of the preferred schematic that we submit to the MSBA. And we continue to do our work in the fall, right? Everything we're going to need to do leading up to a vote. And we're looking for areas as we go through design that we really just need to make cuts. When and if could you actually make a decision to try to do a three-story as part of some sort of value engineering? And my rationale with asking that question, if it is not obvious to everyone, is we've clearly heard it from the school administration multiple times why they prefer a two-story. And I think we can all agree that the school administration has been very open to feedback from all members of the committee, the community, faculty, staff, as this has gone on. And this continues to be the one issue that I think we're at somewhat of an impasse on, potentially, where school administration firmly believes that this is in the best interest of the students that would be occupying this building. But we obviously don't know what we don't know yet. And all we're trying to decide tonight is what to send for estimation, not what option to choose. And we know the delta. We're all smart individuals and we can do the delta on the math, right? So if we did a two-story, I think any smart person's just going to subtract the 600,000 from whatever that comes out to and says, this is roughly what it would cost if we went to three stories. I want a three-story building as part of my preferred schematic. So I'm trying not to force us into a difficult decision now, unless someone tells me we're unanimous, which we haven't done a straw poll, but we can. But I just want to understand from the design team, if we took a vote tonight for cost estimation on two stories, if and when would we have an option to look at three stories if cost became an issue of whether this project moved forward or not?
I think where I'd go, Jason, is trying to get an understanding as you're wrapping up the PSR and you're seeing the cost, and you can do the math the opposite way. You're to the point, if we estimate the three-story scheme and you say, okay, we add a little more, 1% perhaps to get to the two-story, and you can see sort of the wiggle of that cost, because it's more or less the same in that same ballpark. I think changing from two stories to three stories in the middle of schematic design is going to be pretty problematic in terms of maintaining the schedule. And I think also in terms of one of the things we have to do is do the facilities assessment subcommittee of the MSBA board at the completion of PSR. And that may send us back through the FAS committee, as it's called, if we say, hey, we changed it from a two-story to a three-story.
So let me ask it differently. If we voted to cost estimate a two-story tonight, you come back with the cost estimates to us on August 12th, right? And we have to make the decision at that point, right? If, because of what the cost estimates say, the committee wants to go to a three-story configuration, and they believe that's the gating issue between a passing vote and a non-passing vote, do we have that option on August 12th? I realize we probably don't have that option in September or October, but on August 12th, we could come back and say to you, yeah, this is a difference, right? And I don't know where the committee stands, and maybe I should have done a straw poll before I asked this question, but I'm trying to create consensus to allow your cost estimator to do the job they need to do.
Yeah, I think we could manage that one a little easier than switch it during schematic design.
Okay. So by August 12th, we would have to lock in on 2 versus 3 story. So ideally, if we can lock in tonight on 2 versus 3 story, that just makes life a lot simpler. However, if we can't lock in, the vote would not necessarily be binding for purposes of cost. It'd only be binding for purposes of getting a cost estimate. It wouldn't be binding in terms of what we submit for the PSR. Does that make sense?
Yes. From my side, I won't speak for the rest of the committee.
Yeah, no, I'm asking you purely as our professionals. So, all right, Kathy, go ahead.
So you could do it either way, Jason. You know, you could, I say you can take it off or you can add it. So I don't think that matters very much. But I'm trying to get to a project that I think the town will look at and approve and look in my mind can fit into the overall town budget and not cannibalize every other project that anybody wants. So I know what Greg wants, but if I can save $630,000, I'm going to try to do it because I think we still got to get this cost down quite a bit to get to, at least in my mind, what's palatable. So I hate to vote for the 3, but I will just because of that, because I know because I'd rather have a project than no project.
Andrew?
Jason, I guess this is probably a question for you in your other capacities, but my understanding is there's a little bit of a safety issue from a 3-story to a 2 from a fire safety perspective. I don't know if you want to comment on that, or maybe it's something we could have the fire chief weigh in on, but I think that might be something that might sway my decision as well.
I have a lot of thoughts on that, but I am not a firefighter or command officer in this community, so I would defer to Chief Putini on that.
Okay.
But
Do you
I
at least think
certainly-
it's worth having a conversation about it and understanding his thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's more than the fire chief. I think it's your police chief as well.
Okay.
And I also strongly believe we need to be cognizant of the neighborhood too. And I've been on a project, Kathy, you were part of that project, where the neighborhood really could have made or broken that particular project. It wasn't even about what the use of the building was for, right? There was obviously a lot of other things going on there, but I just think we need to also be thinking about the neighbors with this decision as well. Once you get beyond all the considerations that the superintendent's brought forward. So I think, Andrew, if the request is to get a view from our public safety chiefs on 2 versus 3 story, I certainly could get that in writing or have them come to our meeting when we have to make that ultimate decision. But for cost estimation, I think I haven't heard anyone say differently. I think no matter which way we vote tonight, I think we all know how to do the math of what it may or may not mean.
I agree. So we've still got time to get the answers to what the chiefs think and also to understand how high that 3rd story would be as far as neighbors go. So I agree. We're not locking ourselves in tonight. We just.
Okay. Go ahead, Mark. You're on mute, Mark.
Hope you didn't read my lips.
I didn't.
Can we assume what we're voting on tonight does not include an auditorium? Can we just take that off the table?
We can do that as a separate motion. I want to resolve 2 versus 3.
Okay.
And then if we want to go to the auditorium, that is certainly within the bounds of our agenda to options to estimate is what we're voting on. So you don't, in that instance, if you don't want to see an auditorium even estimated, then that would be the motion and we can see where it would go. But I want to resolve 2 versus 3. So Denise, anything on 2 versus 3?
Yeah, a question, I think too, and this is for our professionals, security of the building. Is it easier to secure a 2-story versus a 3-story building? Is it a question that I pose to you or to the chief?
I think I have it to do already.
Right.
To get their opinions. And I will make a determination of whether that's an opinion that goes in executive session or regular session.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. I am going to move that for purposes of cost estimation, that we direct Arrow Street to cost out the 2-story configuration. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Okay. Roll call vote. Kathy,
Nay.
Mark,
Nay.
Denise,
Aye.
Andrew,
Aye.
Roger,
Nay.
Chris,
Aye.
and I am I. So that is a 4-3 vote. Keep me honest on that. I have Roger, Kathy,
Right.
and Mark were the nays. Okay. Mark, do you want to put a motion on the table related to the auditorium before we go to the other design piece?
Yes, I move that we eliminate the auditorium for any consideration of estimating. And then we allow our design team, if they need to make slight modifications to solidify the design without the auditorium, that they can do that.
I'll second that.
Okay. Discussion. Chris?
Yeah, is there any way we can just have them do a breakout value for the auditorium? If they're already doing the legwork for the cost estimate, is it really that difficult to give a breakout value so we can understand what the true impact is, not just square foot numbers?
I'll let Arrow Street answer that.
Yeah, we were planning to do that anyway, primarily because we felt like this is a teetering on either side of a decision point.
Right.
And so we would typically instruct our estimator to carry out a price that we could say, okay, if this comes out, here's what it would be.
Because I would think if you did a square foot credit, it may not be as much as what the true cost of the auditorium is with millwork, seating, any other lighting and sound, because you're doing a combined cafeteria. There's not going to be any seating, there's not going to be any vaulted slope ceilings or any other architectural features in there. So just what does that look like? It'd be good to know.
I'd like to see it come out completely tonight. I don't think we can afford it. As we said last week, we looked at 33 projects, only 6 had auditoriums in elementary schools, and the MSBA makes a really strong case why you don't need an auditorium at this level. It makes a very weak case why you would need it, but 6 out of 33 is less than 20%, so I'd like to see it come out now.
Yeah, I was just thinking the breakout value of the auditorium may be higher instead of looking at it from a square foot cost.
If they do that, they've got to take out then the cafetorium or gymatorium, whatever they're going to do. You can't have them both. So I just think we're making this more complicated than it needs to be. I don't see how it stays in the end with the cost we're looking at already. We've got to wring some cost out of this to try to present a palatable project to town meeting.
Mark, I see your hand. I just want to ask a clarifying point on what Kathy just said, and I think it's to Arrow Street. If this motion were to pass that's on the table, does it make your job cleaner going forward and allow you to really focus and make sure that the cafetorium or where the stage goes, does this just take out a lot of the iterations and allow you to kind of focus on the 3 main scenarios in play? I know you were planning to do it, but like, does it make it simpler?
I would say so. And you can see the sort of gyrations we've gone through in trying to keep it in a reasonable place in the building, but also understanding that at some point it may be clipped out. So yes, I think it simplifies things for our estimator and for the consultant team.
Okay. Mark?
That's my point. I'd rather have a good firm estimate without it. Because just what I'm looking at on the screen, there's some significant impacts to cost by not having it. The building becomes a little more efficient, and the foundation becomes a little smaller. I want to know a firm number of what we're doing. And later, if we want to add the darn thing, that's another whole decision. But I think we've just got to set it aside.
Andrew?
Yeah, I'd agree with Mark there. But Larry, one thought: if this is going to be basically a little bit simpler of an estimation, is it possible to get him not to do a 3-story estimation, but just double check the 600 number is still valid when he's doing the 2-story? So not a full estimation on a 3-story, but maybe just take a sniff test at it if he's got some extra bandwidth now to make sure that we're still carrying a decent number with a 4-3 vote.
That's what he's doing, Andrew. He's not doing a separate 3-story estimation. They're only being paid to do 2.
Correct, but the initial one, he did an approximation, right? He did a back of the envelope. I'm just asking,
Right.
Basically,
And-
if he could, now that we're taking, basically having to do 3 adults with with an auditorium off the table, if he can squeeze in a little bit of a, back of the envelope 3-story revision, just to make sure that we're still carrying a decent number for that in case we end up swinging back the other direction.
So just true up to 630 is what you're saying. Give us
Exactly.
Well, we can talk to them about it. Let's see, the savings was in the soils and the foundation. You had some premium in the steel, and some premium in terms of the number of stairs. You're extending the stairs, you're extending the elevator. And all of that was being weighed out by how much less site area that you're dealing with.
Yeah.
So
it could be exactly the same, but I think that would just feel better if he just opened up whatever he did before and looked at it.
Okay, I can talk to him about that.
Thanks.
Okay, we ready for a vote on Mark's motion? All right. So we'll do a roll call vote. Mark?
Aye.
And Jason, just to confirm, this is to remove it completely, right?
Remove it from any sort of cost estimation.
Okay, thanks.
So Mark was an aye. Andrew?
Aye.
Kathy?
Aye.
Roger?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Denise?
Aye.
And I'm aye as well. I got everyone right?
Yeah.
All right, 7-0 vote to remove it. All right.
That removes it from both, right?
What'd you say?
Removes from both the 305 and the 610.
And the adult, I think, too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Comes out all together. I just want to clarify, I should have said it during discussion, but I just want to clarify that Greg was on record in the last meeting that the auditorium that was even being proposed was going to be too small for some of the educational needs, right? They wanted, if it was going to benefit the educational needs, it was going to have to be a Trotter-sized auditorium, which I think we all know where that probably would have trended from a cost perspective. So I just wanted that to be very clear, given kind of the direction we just gave. Okay, so now I think we're into design features. So I'll turn it back to you, Andrew, in Arrow Street. But I'd ask, as you go through this, to particularly highlight whether we think one design or another is going to potentially be a more costly design, because I think you can tell that may influence the direction of how the vote may flow.
Sounds good. Okay, so I'm pulling up here. This is option C4, and this is the version A. And this is the 610 enrollment. And we did not study this one without the auditorium, but I understand that, and I can speak to what I think would happen in this one without it. But this is characterized by a sort of shared public space, public facing bar, sort of facing the approach road, and a 2-story academic bar on the back, joined by a media space that's sort of the connector between the two. I'll go to the plan here. So if this scheme were to go forward without the auditorium, likely what we would look at doing is sort of reproportioning the administration. Let me use a different spaces and sort of sliding over the gym and health and other spaces that are there now. And so you would sort of see something like this, where this edge would tighten up a bit, maybe even a bit more than what I just drew, which would, result in obviously a smaller overall building size and a lesser amount of foundation. So we were comparing and contrasting this one with option C4B, which I'll show now. Sorry, before I do that, the second floor of this one is, you can see the two grade levels on the two wings on the second floor, on the second level only. Moving to C4B, this one we did look at what happens without the auditorium, so I'm gonna switch gears immediately to that one, which is in a different sheet here. Okay, so this is C4B with no auditorium, and what we've done here is we've taken the media center, which was previously on the second level, and have placed it essentially in the area where the auditorium was located. And so to go to the floor plans, what this results in is media center sort of in the more or less in the center of the building, adjacent to arts and music, which are adjacent to the cafeteria, which gets the stage added to it. And there's no media center on the second floor. I'm going to go up to the second floor for a second. So here you see the second level is just the grade levels in each wing, and there's no connection between them on the second floor. Basically, you're sort of in your grade level, and then you filter down to the first floor to move around if you need to go to another space in the building that's not on your grade level. So to answer your question, Jason, we believe that this C4B with no auditorium would likely be somewhat less expensive than the C4A with no auditorium, for the main reason being that there's this sort of extra space in the middle here in this connector, in this layout, that we don't need in the C4B option, and that results in less foundation. So C4A, yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to summarize it one more time. So C4A with no auditorium, and then I'm going to go to C4B with no auditorium. And again, we believe that this approach is somewhat less cost than C4A with no auditorium.
And the rationale for that is?
And the rationale is that there is somewhat less foundation cost, foundation square footage, due to a more efficient layout.
Okay. So I'm going to allow the superintendent first to give any educational view on C4A versus C4B to solidify that piece of this.
So in terms of the two designs, C4A, I think the media center is more central. In terms of the overall educational plan from C4A to C4B, I don't think there is a difference between the two. So I think they both will achieve the educational plan.
Okay. And one clarifying question for Andrew, and then I'm coming to you, Kathy, is in both C4A and C4B, because of the way you've designed these, there would be dedicated entrances for the public to use let's just say for weekends activities within the building, and allow you to kind of secure off the actual school building to, call it the gym or the cafeteria or these core spaces. I just want to confirm that both options would allow for that.
It's a good question. Yes, I think that both options would allow for that, and they're definitely analogous right now. I think that, as we get into this and start to, actually really dig into the layout, some things might adjust in order to achieve that, but I think it's possible in both scenarios.
Okay. Kathy?
So Andrew, this one I think is cool, but again, I'm trying to save money here. So is there a difference in the non-programmable space square footage between the two that would also save some money besides the smaller foundation on B?
We haven't calculated that specifically between the two. I will say that, when you start to shift the geometry and have these sort of splayed wings, you do start to get slightly, little slivers of area that are, these little triangles that I'm kind of drawing here, which are not present in the version, let's go here, where it's all sort of orthogonal. So, what that adds up to is hard to say, and it starts to kind of be a question of the experience of the building and whether, doing certain little subtle adjustments like that are worthwhile for making the space feel good and, making sure it flows well and things like that. So I would say, to the letter, yes, I think there's slightly more non-programmed space in C4A due to these geometry shifts than there is in C4B. However, I think that it's really kind of not a whole lot.
If I could add to what I think the heart of Kathy's question is, when you have a more regular geometry, it also has some savings in things like the structural, especially in steel. You can have a more regular grid. It's just a certain level of complexity when you add different shapes. So there's a sort of inherent savings in the regularity of this B scheme. Obviously, we would be studying it at this point. I don't know that we're fine tuning into those costs, but this is the sort of strategy that we usually take if we're trying to be as efficient as possible in how we design it structurally.
But this is different than our 2-story versus 3-story, where we think we kind of know what the difference in cost is. Tonight, we got to decide which one to go with, and we probably won't know what the difference in cost is between C1A and C1 or C4A and C4B, other than we think C4B should be a little less costly, and Greg is fine with either one. Which was
that's fair.
305.
Yeah. So I think the key there to differentiate between this discussion and the 2 versus 3-story discussion was there was a compelling argument being made related to the educational vision and how the building would be used. At least I personally have not heard anything to that extent yet in the difference between 4A and 4B. So, Andrew.
For 4B versus 4A, would there be, I'm assuming, a cost beneficial to not having two kind of courtyard areas that you're going to have to build out? Like it's only one here in between the two sides versus on the Butterfly, there's like two approximately the same size, right? That was one thought I had as well. So the space in between the building and the courtyard there. I think they talked about some outdoor stuff there. So I assume having a shared one would be easier.
I think the sum of these two outdoor spaces in the Butterfly scheme are that's slightly more space than the sort of consolidated one that you're seeing here.
Yeah. Okay.
But I think to that point, Andrew, what we'd be looking at is sort of figuring out a playground if there are any outdoor classrooms, as they're called. You might build a few of those things, but otherwise it's trees and grass, and
Yeah,
it's either,
okay.
you know, trees and
But if
grass
we
within a
did-
courtyard, trees and grass outside of a courtyard.
Yeah, but I think if I was trying to think about in my head was if in the other one, if you built an outdoor classroom, you kind of need an outdoor classroom on one side and the other. Whereas here, you could,
Mm.
right? Otherwise, you'd have to like walk to the other side to use it, or that kind of thing. But that was just in my head.
Yeah, in this climate, we might put it on the south because that's where you get the direct sun and near to the library, and say, okay, on the north side, it's more of a straightforward landscaping approach of mostly grass and trees.
Greg?
Is it possible to orient this C4B so that all of the public facing portions of the building are in the front and the two wings are toward the back? Similar to the butterfly design.
So we looked at that, and it's not as straightforward as you might hope. And I can actually just do a quick little
You're sort of
example.
saying, Greg, to rotate it 90 degrees.
Correct.
Yeah.
If you want to use architect's language, yes.
Just gonna try to white out this other one for a second. So if we do that, there's a couple things. So let me just send this in the back here. I think we get a little bit less of the building overlapping with the existing Neary footprint. And we also start to get the classroom wings getting pretty deep into the property, and perhaps deeper than we might want them to go. Thinking about things like grading and which are not on this drawing and so forth. So it starts to maybe want to. I won't say no. I think that it might be possible, but it doesn't fit as easily, let's say, as the butterfly scheme does with this. I'll just cycle back to the butterfly one.
Andrew, is this the same scale as the other one?
Yeah, it's the same
Could
scale.
you paste the that picture on
This
top of
one?
the other one? Yeah.
Let's do it.
The rationale behind my question is I do like how the academic wings are in the back.
Yeah.
Just from a safety perspective.
Yeah, we were talking about that as well, as because with this scheme, I'm not quite sure the driveways and things are quite properly presented, and we could begin to rotate it as Andrew's doing to see what the nuances are. The interesting part is this way the classroom bars sort of are going east-west. So in some ways you can control the daylight into them. On the other hand, the courtyard gets a little darker because it's not facing south. A lot of things to think about as we go through that effort.
Larry, would that necessarily change the estimation that much, or is this kind of something we could kind of work out as part of schematic?
Yes, as part of schematic.
Okay.
I don't see that impacting our estimate too terribly much. We do have some amount of the building that's going to stick over the footprint. I don't know if we've managed to get the new borings scheduled yet, Katie.
Not scheduled yet, no.
Okay.
Any further discussion on C4A versus C4B? Then I will make a motion that for purposes of cost estimation, we use option C4B as in Bravo.
Second.
We got a second? Any further discussion?
Just to confirm, that's the non-butterfly one.
Correct.
The courtyard scheme.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. Roll call vote. Kathy,
Aye.
Andrew,
Aye.
Roger,
Aye.
Denise,
Aye.
Mark,
Aye.
Chris,
Aye.
and I am I as well. I got everyone right?
Yep.
All right, 7-0. Mark, you have a question?
Yeah, I can make a motion. Could we make sure on each of the cost estimates, actually including the reno, that we add the cost of the passive gas system under the building? And I don't think we can do that on the reno. And at least 2 more monitoring wells somewhere near the southeast corner and the northeast corner. So that we're between the building and the landfill. I just want to make sure those costs are included.
I'll make a note.
Yeah, Mark, I had wrote those down about 20 minutes ago.
Okay,
Particularly the 2 to 3 monitoring wells, sort of skirting the edge of the building.
I don't think we need a motion on that unless anyone believes
Okay.
otherwise, especially given Larry was already going to do it.
We can always pull it out later if we need to.
Yeah. Okay. So I believe, unless someone wants to correct me, we have accomplished what we need to accomplish for tonight. Obviously, we have some very tough decisions coming in a couple of weeks, but please let me know if I'm mistaken, Arrow Street or Skanska.
Jason, I just thought it might be worthwhile to show the B4 scheme briefly, because we did draw that without the auditorium as well, since the last time you all saw it, it did have the auditorium. If that's, it'll just take a second.
Yeah, go ahead.
So this is, and I'm going to just pull up the prior version as well. 1 second, once my computer catches up. So the last time we talked about this, the auditorium was here adjacent to the gym, and the idea being that it's the sort of addition part of the ad reno is this piece. Here's the auditorium there, and what we've done to remove it was essentially rotated the gym so that it aligns more closely with the addition of the classrooms, making sort of a cleaner bar of the addition portion of the ad reno. So just wanted to get that in front of everybody so you have a visual for the 3 approaches that are going to go to pricing.
Any questions on that?
Jason, we haven't spent a lot of time on the ad on this one, but are the edits that we've done to the other ones gonna kind of be reflected in here?
The space reductions will be included in the overall square footages that we give to the estimator. So yes.
Okay, but I mean, like we were kind of focusing on the other 2 ones in the spreadsheet. So like when we, the 900 square foot classrooms or something, for if we're adding new ones, those will be reflected in here, kind of that same idea, right?
Yep, that's right.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
The one thing I'll just point out, and sorry I didn't realize this sooner, is I think you need to be thinking about a driveway that potentially goes all the way around the school from a safety perspective as well. We can confirm that with our public safety chiefs, but I do notice it in all instances, it seems to truncate on the playground side. Obviously manage it via gates and stuff, but it's a little extra pavement. I'm sure it's not a big deal, but just something to consider as you think about your traffic flows.
Sure.
Okay. Public comment.
Are you gonna do any other business properly brought forth, Jason?
I will. It's coming up in about 3 seconds. So there's no public comment. Meeting schedule is main committee meetings the next meeting, unless something comes up that I'm not aware of, is going to be August 12th. And that will be in person at the Public Safety Building. We will have it set up so it's hybrid and recorded, because I think that's obviously a very important meeting to be recorded. And the communications subcommittee will meet before then to talk about, I'll call it advertising the meeting, to make sure that everyone's eyes are wide open to what may happen at that meeting. And I'm sure there are plenty of other subcommittee meetings that may happen in advance of that, particularly on the finance side. But I won't speak to those because I'm just going on the main committee meeting schedule on this.
Is that going to be a 7 o'clock meeting, Jason?
Right now it's scheduled for 7. If we feel like we can and should start sooner, we can. I mean, the room's ours, so, but right now it's calendared for 7 p.m.
Thank you.
Okay. Other business, Kathy.
So just to kind of piggyback what you just said, the finance subcommittee will be meeting on August the 9th, which is a Friday, to dive deep into the estimates and the impact on the projected impact on the town's budget, finances, etc. I would encourage anyone that wants to join us to join us. But if you do, we're going to have a quorum of the NBC. So Jason's going to have to post a meeting more than 48 hours before that one. He may just want to go ahead and post one anyway, just to be safe. But I would encourage you to join us so that you've got a lot to think about over the weekend. If you are in the camp that cost is going to be one of the more important factors in your decision, if it's not, then maybe not so much. But we will have a whole lot of information prepared for that meeting. It will get posted as part, it will get out to you. So you've got the weekend to look at it. The second thing I wanted to point out under the other business properly brought forth is that for any of the committee that is believes that they're going to vote for the 4th grade school based on what they know now, this is not our bailiwick, but I think one of the things you're going to have to think about between now and then is Finn, because that means Finn is closed. And so we've got an empty building. One of the questions that will certainly be brought forth at the special town meeting in April, if that is the project we bring forth, is what are you going to do with Finn? And I don't see how somebody doesn't have an answer for that as part of the 4th grade configuration discussion. Jason, you and I can talk about this offline too, about how to do this, but you can't leave Finn sitting there as an empty building because the question is going to get asked, then why are you closing Finn if you don't have a use for it? So I think that the use of Finn has got to be part of a discussion and gets answered. I know Jason believes that, I agree with that. I think we both agree, but maybe for a different reason. He believes that maybe the non-school age population here that don't have kids in would like to see something built that would be useful to them. That may be true, but I think that it's going to be more important to that group what the cost is as far as the impact on their taxes. So I just think we got to have an answer to that, even if there's no specific project that would be proposed simultaneously, which is probably going to be the case. There's no plan for that at this moment. Jason chaired a committee where they looked at how Finn could be repurposed if Finn is closed. So that work is done. It's been presented. That committee has been disbanded. So that could be brought forth again to show as something that could happen. But I just think anybody that's heading toward a 4th grade recommendation has got to put that in their mind too. And by that, I mean, put the cost in your head as far as what that would be to factor in. We will, with our numbers, probably show, which is what we've done so far, the finance committee, what could be the cost of renovating the school based on what that committee did. So we will have a separate computation with that too, built into some of our numbers in case someone needs that to make the decision. But I just think that there's going to be so much discussed on that Monday night that it would be helpful for everybody to have a weekend to have all this to look at so that you're not hearing it for the first time on Monday night.
So because this is other business, I'm not going to allow any discussion on it. Procedurally, though, Kathy, I think when you post your finance subcommittee meeting, just put Neary Building Committee and Neary Building Committee dash Finance Subcommittee.
Okay.
Then we're covered. Because both, and just make sure Jim and Amy are aware of that when you're posting it, that it's a duly posted meeting because we may have a quorum.
Okay.
On the second topic, as the capital representative, I will take that topic to capital to see if they have any appetite in trying to figure out an answer to that question. I won't add any more than that tonight. Andrew, you have something else?
Yeah, Larry, I think I mentioned it before, but if there is preliminary estimation or he does them kind of piecemeal one by one, please send them over as soon as possible. I think the turnaround time on this is going to be tight. So
Yeah, I'm expecting we'll get all 3 estimates simultaneously.
okay.
That would be my guess.
On the 6th, correct, Larry?
That's what we've said, yes.
Roger?
So, when is that finance committee going to be again?
August the 9th, Roger. So we get the estimate on the 6th, the 3
That's
estimates.
on the 6th, the meeting on the 9th, okay.
And that gives, remember, 3-person committee may be efficient, but it's really hard when 2 people make a quorum. So I'm going to sit down alone with the treasurer and our outside bond consultant and put all this together in a coherent fashion to be able to present to the entire 3-person committee on that Friday, the 9th, to be ready to represent it on Monday, the 12th, to the entire committee in case that needs to be done.
And we'll make sure that keeps getting communicated, where it is, time, all that stuff.
I'm assuming, Jason, you agree with all that. If you don't, let me know. But I just think it's worthwhile truly walking this forward as far as what has to happen logistically.
Yeah, I mean, the timing's tough. Let me just make one recommendation on that, Kathy. To the extent that Becky is available in and around then, right?
I agree. I didn't mean to leave Becky out.
Yeah.
I meant to leave out Andrew Pfaff and Mark Davis on purpose.
Yeah.
But that was the point I was trying to make. So I'm not trying to leave Becky out. So yes,
Yeah.
she will be certainly involved.
Okay. I'm gonna make a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, roll call vote. Roger?
Aye.
Andrew?
Aye.
Denise?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Kathy?
Aye.
And I am aye as well. Have a good evening.
Good night. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Aye.